So what did we learn from this exercise?
Time Twister is trash.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Ryan.
And I am your host, Callahan, and today we are going to be talking about what cards would possibly go onto a CEDH ban list and why. Please note, this doesn't mean we do think that CEDH should have its own ban list. In fact, I personally hold the opposite opinion. I wrote a whole article about it. You could read it if you want. But before we get into that, we need to pay the bills. Our merchandise is now available in our store. We have dice, coins, playmats, tokens, sleeves, and more all available. Go to playingwithpowermtg.com and help support our channel. You can also help support us on Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, webcam league, play days, early access to videos, names in the credits of our show, exclusive videos, merchandise, and even the ability to be on an episode. There are tiers available for everyone, so go to patreon.com/playingwithpowermtg and help support the show.
And speaking of Patreons, we want to do a Patreon shout out for every single episode, and today's Patreon shout out is to Darius Mitchell. Thank you,
Darius Mitchell.
Appreciate you.
We love our Mox Opals.
Yes.
We love our Mox Opal patrons.
Yes, we do.
Just as much as we love our Mox Tantalite patrons.
I mean, we love all of our patrons personally.
We love all of our patrons. But, you know, I love the Mox Tantalites the most.
Yeah, they are. They're our bread and butter. I love you guys.
Anyways.
I mean, I love you all, but, you know.
I love you.
I love you all.
You know who I love the least? Our Mox Pearl patrons.
Please don't unsubscribe, Mox Pearls. That was just a joke.
I'm kidding. But if you make me play against one more stacks pile again, I swear.
I swear to God, I'll cancel this Pearl tier right now.
I'll put your favorite card, onto this CEDH ban list, which we're about to talk about.
All right, go ahead and kick us off, Cal.
Yes, of course. So, as I mentioned right at the top of the show, we just wanted to think about the concept of what cards are maybe actually bannable in CEDH and why. If CEDH were to be its own format and whatnot, what cards would kind of just have to go on to the ban list? We have two kind of major overarching sections here. One is obviously power level. There's some really powerful cards that we play around with. Which ones of those might be ban worthy? And then the other one might something people don't talk about as much, but is something you do see considered quite a lot when Wizards is managing formats and whatnot, and that is tournament considerations. Does a card eat up too much time? Does a card cause consistent problems in tournaments for whatever reason or another? So we'll talk about that too. But of course, first we're going to start with power level. Ryan, what is a card that is too powerful in the CEDH format and why?
Well, one of the things I want to think about when we're considering what cards we think may or may not belong on this list is how it affects the format. Because the regular Commander ban list is more of a philosophy, not the philosophy document, but a philosophy on how you should approach Commander games. That's why not everything is on there, even though some things are discouraged. And while some things are on there only as a representation or like a flag or a signpost that says, hey, this kind of stuff is generally discouraged. And those types of things are kind of what feed and drive the Commander ban list. We don't always see other ban lists that we see are based upon the things that we just talked about: power levels, tournament considerations, and also just the homogenization of a certain format. When we start to see something get way, way too homogenized and every single deck is either running that or running away to beat that, that's when you start to see a problem that should probably warrant something like a ban. So when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about it along those lines. I'm thinking, okay, let's forget Commander philosophies for a second. This is CEDH now. Nothing's off the table. What is it that we would like to see either create better diversity in the format, maybe create a little bit more, variance, or, stop consolidating so many things into so few archetypes? What are the types of things that we might want to consider banning based upon those factors? The first one I would have to say is Dockside Extortionist. I absolutely love this card. Everyone else absolutely loves this card. And this card is in every godforsaken deck that runs red. I don't care If it's not a creature strategy, I don't care if it's, if you're not only using it for something like a combo potential, you are absolutely running this card. It is unbelievable.
Ryan, I entirely agree. I was reading this will date this episode a little bit, but I was reading the brand new, quarter one of 2023 rules update from the Commanders Committee, the Commander Rules Committee yesterday. And there was no changes. They said no changes in the format. Keeping our eye on poison, because obviously Phyrexia all will be one coming out. People are always worried about how many poison counters should really kill people in Commander. And they said something really succinct and interesting, I think, about Dockside Extortionists, which they finally announced they're kind of like taking off of their watch list, because they determined that, given all those things that you were just mentioning a minute ago about what actually makes for a ban card at EDH, Dockside doesn't really meet that. And what they were saying was that Dockside Extortionist does a very good job of scaling with the table that you're playing at. Since it counts, artifacts and enchantments, at a lot of more casual tables, people are playing their Arcane Signet and their Soul Ring. But past that, a lot of 3 CMC rocks, definitely not packing 12 to 15 rocks the same way that we often are. Maybe there's a few random enchantments out there, but the Dockside, when we get to this power level of the format, it scales incredibly well. Dockside, we all play it because 2 CMC rituals historically are very problematic in Magic the Gathering. If we look at other formats like Legacy or Modern, you'll see that like Seething Song is banned. In Seething Song, you pay 3 mana to get 5. Yeah, or Rite of Flame is banned.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pay 1 mana to get 2 mana, maybe 3 or 4 mana, depending on, because you can play 4 of them, right? So it can be more than 2, but pay 1 mana to get 2. Tons of rituals are banned, and those are pay 2 mana to make 3 mana, pay 3 mana to make 5 mana. Dockside usually reads pay 2 mana to make 5 mana at minimum, maybe 6, maybe 8, maybe a huge number. And they're treasures. It's not like you have to use it now or lose it. You can use it, use 5 of your mana to try to do something, get stopped, and come back around to your turn, and you still have 3 treasures left over to play with. Way too strong, Ryan. It's got to go on the ban list.
I remember back in the day, in the casual times of 2000, I don't know, 11 through 14 and stuff like that of casual Magic, they were talking about Prime Time and Prophet of Krufix, and they were talking about how the entire game warps around it. And Dockside has this problem. You'll look at mono blue lists and they'll run Phantasmal Image, and you're like, what are you running that for? Are you copying something yours? What am I missing here? I'm not really seeing what you're copying. They're like, oh, it's a blue Dockside. Okay, that's a problem. If you're running Phantasmal Image just to make it a blue Dockside is getting way too strong and really kind of homogenizing a lot of this format into the point where people are talking about, well, I don't like Timna Thrasios as much anymore because I just misread so much for things like Dockside. Dockside is just so unbelievably format warping on this end of the format that I think it's banning while upsetting just tons of people will absolutely create a lot more diversity without that such cheap and free, cheap access to these combo enablers, to all of this mana and such explosive potential in this scaled up table, like you said.
Exactly. And speaking of cards that Timna Thrasios is missing out on when they are not playing red, let's move on to maybe the even more powerful, probably not more powerful, but the card that's actually winning so many of these red decks games, Underworld Breach. It's no secret to people who play CEDH that Underworld Breach is incredibly popular. You see it everywhere. It's wildly strong. It's part of a 3-card combo, which is arbitrarily easy to put together with the card Intuition and whatnot. Underworld Breach, premium win con in our format, even just so happens to be a valuable piece. Pay 2 mana, put Underworld Breach into play. All right, all of my stuff has Escape 3 now. So, I know that we were talking just yesterday about how a lot of Godo lists will just play it because, it's a 2 CMC get some of my stuff back. A little red regrowth action, a little red Yawgmoth's Will. So I don't think there's a world in which Underworld Breach can stick around in a CEDH format with its own ban list.
So many decks on the deck list database actually say that this is what their name is. This is, something breach. This is Blue Farm breach, or Timna whatever breach. It is such a defining and huge archetype in our format because of just how resilient it is. The moment that Underworld Breach resolves, you have all of your counter magic in your graveyard too, so you pretty much just won. Like, they're like, oh, well, guess what? I'll bounce your breach. That's fine. I have a Pact of Negation in my graveyard. I'll counter it. And then someone else does. They're like, that's okay. I have a Pact of Negation in my graveyard. I'll just counter it. When they printed a card that was better than Yawgmoth's Will,
what if we made it cheaper?
Problem.
And like, sure, there's a cost. You have to exile stuff from your graveyard, but I wonder if there's like any easy ways we can get a lot of cards in our graveyard. Have you ever heard of any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. And it's like, oh, did you know this synergizes well with Lion's Eye Diamond? Be like, yeah, I mean, Lion's Eye Diamond was already good, but you found another way to break Lion's Eye Diamond. It's already broken. And it's unbelievably powerful. It's like what I just said. If you printed a better Yawgmoth's Will, because it is better than Yawgmoth's Will in every single way. Yes. Oh, you have to escape. Who cares? You still get the cards back in your graveyard. When I cast my Brain Freeze, they don't all get exiled. I get to recast the Brain Freeze. I get to recast the counter magic. I get to recast my everything. That is absolutely busted. And it was also banned in multiple formats.
And is currently at long last overtaking Modern. It is at long last become one of the best Modern decks.
Which surprised me, quite frankly, that it took this long, in my opinion. It was banned from Legacy instantly, in very short order. Yeah. And obviously it's, LED is not, LED isn't correct, available in Modern, but that's a whole other discussion. But Underworld Breach would make it so that so many other strategies are now not all revolving around Breach. Everything is just like, well, you could slot a Breach line because you're in this colors. Oh, it's a Breach deck now. Oh, you can put this in there because it's, you may not have access to white, but that's okay because this and this are there, so you can make Breach out of it, and just everything becomes Breach. You put it so well when you said mono red Godo decks are running it as reclaim effects. That's showing you the power. Like, if I get disrupted and you destroy my helm, I can cast Underworld Breach, escape 3 cards, cast Seething Song or something from my graveyard twice, by the way. Just net positive each one, as long as I have the cards, and then just escape helm again. It wasn't even the combo. It was just for raw value. That's how often these things are getting slotted into these decks. That's once again a homogenization thing, and it's pushing out other strategies that might otherwise get more of a chance to shine simply because they're just not as good as Breach, unfortunately.
Yep. At floor, an incredibly powerful and unique effect that many decks want, and at ceiling, an incredibly compact, homogenizing, powerful, hard to interact with win con. Underworld Breach, you're out of here. Speaking of homogenizing, incredibly compact, easy to make work win cons. Next up, you know it, you love it. It's a Merfolk Wizard. It costs 2 blue. When it enters the battlefield, you look at X cards equal to your devotion to blue, and then if X is equal to or less than the number of cards left in your library, you win the game. It's a 1/3, I think. I never have to think about the power and toughness of this card. It's Thassa's Oracle. Ryan, pop off.
Out in the distance, I heard the cry of 10,000 fans as they immediately unsubscribed from our podcast. Look, Thassa's Oracle is, maybe I should start this with saying, hey, why would you ban Thassa's Oracle? Why wouldn't you just ban Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact? Thassa's Oracle is fine if I can manually assemble it. No, I'm sorry. Thassa's Oracle is the problem here. The reason being that Thassa's Oracle is the problem is that you have basically every deck, like we said with Underworld Breach, as long as you can run blue and black, or maybe I can even take that away. As long as you can run blue, you can win the game with Thassa's Oracle, and many do. I've seen this in Kennen lists. I've seen this in Elsha. that uses Storm and Prowess and stuff like that still run Thassa's Oracle. If you run blue, you find a way to
Hell,
just do it.
even
I've seen it
even
in
even
Urza
the like
lists.
last
Yeah.
iteration of Rashmi, like back when people were trying to make it work, you played Thassa's Oracle and you got rid of your library with Paradigm Shift, a terrible 4
Yep.
CMC enchantment that lets you exile your library.
Thought
Yep.
Lash was
Sorry,
another
Paradigm
one.
Shift. Thought Lash is
Exile
the
the
card
top.
I was thinking of, but Paradigm
Oh,
Shift
okay,
is
yeah.
another
Yeah,
terrible card that lets you kind of exile your library.
But basically, if you can find a way to get rid of your library, which by the way is super easy to do, you'd run Thassa's Oracle, infinite mana plus a draw, Urza, Lord High Artificer. You just exile them all. Just do his flip and then cast it from exile. Like there's so many things that you can do, and the reason that we say Thassa's Oracle is because of that ETB effect. That's really the kicker here, because Labman's been around since like 2011, and you don't see us clamoring for a Labman ban, do you? That's because of the difficulty to interact with a triggered ability on the stack. Everyone has always clamored and made the horrible takes all the time online that says that dies to removal. Why would that's not that card is just fine. It dies to removal. There's no protection. Blah blah blah. Thassa's Oracle
Doesn't even fall under that one.
it doesn't even fall under that. Exactly. I think you have exactly maybe 3 effects in the entire
there's
game.
Like three or 4 versions of like stifle effects. Yeah.
Exactly. That's 4 cards, and you have to have it in your hand, have to be in its colors, and you have to have it exactly when the triggered ability hits. No, that's super hard to interact with. It's super difficult to make that work, and it created. You want to talk about homogenization? I could talk about this all day. I'll shut up. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on Thassa's Oracle?
You know, I think you said it pretty succinctly, and a lot of this does fall under a bit of what we said about Underworld Breach as a win con as well. Of course, there's always going to be homogenization in a competitive format. There's always going to be like the best thing to do, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, actually. But when it comes to Thassa's Oracle, it is hard. I think you would be hard pressed to find something that could ever be like as powerful and as good as Thassa's Oracle in CEDH. Even if they printed another really broken thing, it's pretty hard to interact with a creature unless you come packed with the worst counterspells imaginable. It's pretty hard to deal with, as you said, an ETB unless you choose to register Stifle in your CEDH deck, which I know a lot of people have split opinions on. I don't think it's worth it.
Yes.
Catch me packing Void Slime. It's the like blue green one that, yes, it's
spell activated or triggered ability
plus Stifle.
Wow.
Is what it is. But I know, crazy, right?
Wow.
Hard to interact with that ability. So pretty much like once it's on the stack, if it resolves, if you don't happen to have like literally your Force of Will in hand or whatever, when it's put on the stack, you're probably just losing the game. And,
losing the game.
2-card combos, fine. 2-card combos that cost 3 to 4 mana are very hard to interact with, etc., etc. Miss me with that.
Yeah, I agree. But that's what I'm saying. This is so unbelievably polarizing, I would say, that people are like, oh, it's such a compact, clean, and easy win con. Because I have seen what happens when you don't have Thassa's Oracle, and there's people that out there that are like trying to not run Thassa's Oracle, and sometimes they have some difficulty closing out the game because they have to assemble a 5-6 piece interaction with this, that, and the other. And it's just like, yeah, okay, I understand. It would have been easier to generate infinite mana, empty your library, and cast Thassa's Oracle. Sometimes it's easier to have that clean win con, but we have seen such a ubiquitous amount of this card that you are constantly measuring everything else to it. Is that as good as Thassa's Oracle? If it's not, I'd rather just run Oracle. So it stifles what would other be possibly new emerging strategies or archetypes simply because of its existence. Well, it's not as good, so I'm not even going to try. And that's a problem.
Ryan, I deeply, deeply agree with you. Thassa's Oracle, banned, bong. I
by
know,
by all of
exactly.
our fans,
But hey,
by
no, there's
every
a lot of
single
people
one.
on our in our YouTube comments who hate Thassa's
Oh,
Oracle. It's so
that's true.
boring.
That's true. Oh, it's the most
Oh, it's
boring
so
win con.
terribly boring. Another Thassa's Oracle win. Unsubscribed.
Oh,
Public subscriber to
subscribe.
channel for 4 years. Okay, buddy. See you on Friday.
See you on Friday. Oh snap! Oh yeah.
All right. Moving on. Those were kind of our top like obvious picks. And going past there, we have a few more things that are kind of a little more would we ban these things? I don't know. But we do have like one more definite ban. We kind of came around to this on the assumption that kind of is CDH as its own format. There's kind of a blank slate. We don't have any of these EDH banned cards banned in the format anymore. And there's a lot of stuff on the EDH ban list that could probably still remain banned in CEDH, like Paradox Engine, obviously. But we wanted to specifically call out the power eight of the power 9 on the ban list. No Ancestral Recall, no
Yeah.
Moxes, no Lotus. All that. No Time Vault. Is Time Vault a power of the power 9? I can never remember. It's not. Okay.
It's not. It's Black Lotus, the 5 Moxes, Time
Twister.
Twister,
Yeah. Okay,
Time Walk,
Yeah,
and
okay. Yeah,
Ancestral
get Time
Recall.
Walk out of here. Time Vault, that's banned too. Miss me with the Time Vault.
I've played enough no ban lists to know that it is absolutely format warping.
But
it is.
Past all of that, Time Twister banned in CEDH, Ryan. Time Twister is a very powerful card that has been banned in a lot of formats. It's a part of the Power 9 for a reason. I think a lot of CEDH players under respect the power of wheels in general, but specifically Time Twister. Time Twister, a wildly powerful ability, but there also is a really big difference in between you drawing 7 new cards and your opponent drawing 7 new cards versus you drawing 7 new cards and your opponent's drawing 21 new cards. Definitely a bit of a difference there compared to the 1v1 formats. Do you think Time Twister is maybe actually too good for CEDH, Ryan?
No, I don't. I don't think it's too good. I think it's a perfectly fine card. I think people are trying to min-max this wheels thing a little bit too much. You mean to tell me that I have 2 cards in my hand, my opponents have 4 cards in my hand, I should not wheel and get 7 cards in my hand? Get out of here. I'm going to do that. Yes, you could try and tell me about, oh, well, we've done some studies and this, that, and the other. And I'm sure that is in fact happened. So-and-so case where somebody cast a wheel, they ended up losing the game or whatever. Correlation is not automatically causation. Sometimes you're looking for specific data points and extrapolating your own results based upon that. Not trying to discourage anybody from doing this type of research. And I'm not knocking on any of the people who actually did do that research because I think that stuff is really important. But when we're in the thick of the game, I've got 2 cards in hand and you got 4, I'm going to give myself 5 extra cards. I'm going to do that. And Time Twister is a way to do that. If I need to ship away somebody's graveyard because they fueled up a breach because I see an active LED and Brain Freeze in there and they're about to tutor, I'm going to ship that away with a Time Twister. If they have something that, if I need to get back into this game and I need to get a couple extra cards or something like that, I'm going to Windfall. I'm going to Wheel of Fortune. I'm going to do that because it also is giving me 7 cards for 3 mana. I know rates, this, that, and the other multiplayer formats. I know we can argue this all day long. But at the end of the day, I need those cards to win the game. The person with more cards in my hand is not going to be I'm not going to win against that unless I draw perfect cards. And me getting visibility into more cards gives me a higher chance of winning the game. Anyway, that being said, I understand a draw 7 for 3 is insanely powerful. Oh, and it goes in your graveyard, by the way. It doesn't even exile itself. So that's even better. But we have printed so many cards since 1993, 1994. And I would not argue that this card deserves to be in the spot anymore of like a power 9 even. Like I understand it's powerful, but you mean to tell me that is number 9 out of the 9 most powerful cards ever printed in the 30,000 card history of this game? I don't know if that's the case anymore. A lot has happened since then. I don't know if it really belongs on there. Every time I see a Time Twister resolve in a game of CEDH, That game wasn't over. That wasn't Dockside. That wasn't Underworld Breach. I'm not saying those belong in the Power 9. I'm saying that those are things that actually ended games. Time Twister isn't doing that. It's just kind of fueling that interaction, fueling that game to go forward. I don't think it should be banned personally, not in CDH.
Ryan, I would agree with you. I think Time Twister is a very good card. Wheel effects are strong, obviously, definitely more risky in a 4-player format than in a 2-player format.
Of course.
But yeah, Time Twister, it can stay legal in our version of CEDH, Ryan. But you said there's been a lot of cards printed since the original Power 9. And a lot of the Power 9 are, in fact, something that we're going to talk about next. Fast mana. I know this is something that a lot of people hold a lot of opinions about, because I think you could definitely make the argument that the prevalence of excellent fast mana is probably actually like the defining factor of what like makes CEDH. If we, every deck gets to play Mana Crypt and Soul Ring and not Arcane Signet, that's not a good example, but Mox Opal and, Mox Diamond and Chrome Mox and all this kind of stuff. All of these decks get to play these cards, and all of these cards rapidly expand the amount of mana available to you, and therefore the amount of game actions you can take or the amount of powerful spells you can cast. And so it's a tough one. I think there's a world in which you ban fast mana, or maybe the very best fast mana, maybe you ban the Mana Crypt, or maybe you ban the, people don't really play Grim Monolith anymore. Maybe you ban the Mana Vault, maybe you ban the Chrome Box or whatever. But I think it could be hard without, I think there can be CEDH without Thassa's Oracle. Thassa's Oracle came out in 2019. Incredibly compact, incredibly powerful win con, sure. Dockside Extortionist came out in early 2020. Incredibly powerful card. It doesn't define CEDH. I think if you almost like, how Brainstorm, we all know Brainstorm is actually way too powerful of a card to be legal in Legacy. Maybe like realistically,
Legacy.
like it's maybe like it should quote unquote be banned, or like how many cards are on the vintage restricted list because Mishra's Workshop is a card that's never actually going to be restricted in vintage, right? Like Mishra's Workshop maybe should, quote unquote, historically have been a restricted card in vintage, but that's just never going to happen because it's, a very integral part of the format that people care about, much like Brainstorm and Legacy. So, I think I would, for one, end up not banning fast mana in CEDH because of that exact consideration. I think it's weird to talk about that a little bit, but it's something that eternal formats kind of have to vie with. And, I think if you wanted to make a CEDH ban list and still have players left at the end, fast mana has to largely stay off of it.
Yeah, I really like that opinion, and I think it's a really good stance to take because there are real considerations to be said in that. How many people would quit Legacy if Force of Will was banned? Just quit. They're like, there's no way I can interact with so-and-so without this
I love
free counterspell. And yeah. But like you said, vintage is almost somewhat defined by these certain decks. Things like shops, like you said. If they restricted that almost a piece of vintage's identity would go away. And just like, but my counter argument is this. You can redefine and restructure things, and people just hate change is really what it is. You can do that and a format can still survive. And a lot of people lived under this umbrella for so long, they feel that they can't live outside of it. And they think, well, there's no way that we can live without shops, or there's no way we can live with this. But we've seen time and time again over the history of Magic and over the history of how we've seen bans come and go that you absolutely can do that. And a lot of times they are, in fact, a net positive for the format. People just didn't want to lose it because it was either part of an identity or part of their favorite deck. I can name countless examples off the top of my head. In Commander, Golos. Golos, it rocked the world. They were so angry when that happened, because not because nobody played it or because it was oppressive, it's because everybody played it. That was the problem. Modern, Splinter Twin was banned. Oh my God. When Splinter Twin got banned, everyone who was playing Splinter Twin said, I'm quitting Modern. And everyone who was not playing Splinter Twin was like, thank God I just freed up half my sideboard. People hated Twin.
Or
and
loved
they were
Twin.
like, yeah. It was so polarizing. People weren't just mid on Twin. There was like, whatever, I don't care. Like it was absolutely polarizing, but Modern was better for it. And it made a lot of people upset, but it is in a better place because they were not afraid to be the bad guy and do the thing that was better for the overall health for the format versus just maybe hurting some people's feelings or making people feel bad that their favorite archetype was banned. I think fast mana actually should be banned. I like that we actually disagree on this opinion here because fast mana, we have plenty of formats that exist without fast mana. And fast mana is like you said, kind of almost defining this format. When people see you in casual Commander play a Mana Crypt, they're like, oh, is that a CEDH deck? Mana Crypt isn't only legal in CEDH. Mana Crypt is legal in regular Commander too. But people automatically see a Mana Crypt thinking, oh, he's playing some high-powered Magic over there. He's pub stomping us with a CEDH deck. Because Mana Crypt has become so ubiquitous with CEDH. And the idea of maybe possibly getting away from that, and it would do so much to also nerf other strategies without absolutely removing them. For example, Ad Nauseam. The way that you win with Ad Nauseam is you cast Ad Nauseam, but you also have to get the fast mana to keep going
mana
after
is
you're
a
done
lot.
with the Naus.
And having enough mana after you spend 5 mana to actually be able to win the game usually relies upon you finding your 0 and 1 drop rocks and stuff to then be able to make the additional 4+ mana you need to win the game from there. Yeah.
Exactly. And so if we lost the Soul Rings, the Mox Diamonds, the Chrome Moxes, and the Mana Crypts, even just those 4, it would make Ad Nauseam less dominating. It'd still be an archetype though, which is nice. We would still have that, so it wouldn't completely eliminate it because at that point just ban Ad Nauseam. But we would have certain things would also have a chance to shine more. How often have we said dork strategies, elves and stuff like that, and mana dorks and stuff like that, those don't have a place here because they're just not as fast as rocks, and that's brutal. So now you have to almost run stacksy kind of stuff just to make dorks work because you're just too slow because you got to wait a turn to use that mana. Could probably benefit from a little bit less of this fast mana dominating this format and just creating a speed that's so quick that you have to be live almost turn 1. And I think that there's something to be said for a shakeup and almost a balance of doing that. And I also know that that's very polarizing because literally every single deck in the format runs those at least 4 rocks, with the exception of maybe 5 decks, like almost none.
Ryan, I think that's also a very fair opinion. I think I personally could go either way, which is that's the hard thing. Yeah,
I like. Yeah, I like that your opinion is that you should keep them. I think that that's good.
And we should probably keep this moving, Ryan. We've already been talking for a half hour, and we have so many things to go through. So one thing I wanted to mention a little bit that I think we have to think about like a tiny little bit is, what is always like the next best thing. I specifically recall the first time back in, I think it was I forget exactly what standard it was, but the first time they had banned something in standard for a long time, they banned 3 cards all at once. They kind of banned 1 card from a top archetype and another card from a top archetype. And then they said, you know what? We know that blue-white spirits is going to be easily the best thing once we ban these 2 cards. So we're banning Reflector Mage too. Just preemptively, we're just going to, we're banning Reflector Mage because we know that once we ban these 2 best cards out of the 2 best decks, blue-white spirits is easily going to overtake everything. So we're just going to take out one of its like solid role players too. And everybody at the time was like, well, why would you even do that? Oh. Well, I'm happy that they did it because I agree that standard would have become miserable as a player of standard myself at the time. An expert 17-year-old Callahan, really. I agree. But, I think, and that's always something to consider. I don't think you'd have to like ban something out of the gate to say, oh, obviously with Thassa's Oracle and Underworld Breach off the ban list, this next best thing also needs to come off. But, I think there's a world where obviously if fast mana is kept legal, because that's an important part of this combo, Isochron Scepter plus a Dramatic Reversal, good old ISO Rev. Would that become too good for CEDH, quote unquote, too good? I don't think it would. Is there a world where ISO Rev maybe needs to go on the ban list eventually? Maybe. I don't know. I have less to say about this than I thought when I wrote it down. So
I think that it deserves to be on a watch list, is what I would say. I'd be like, okay, well, I remember the Underworld Breach, Thassa's Oracle, Dockside days, and those involved a lot of Paradox Engine. They involved a lot of ISO Rev, and that's how a lot of people would win the game. They'd win with like a Lab Band combo, but they'd also do something else. But overall, ISO Rev was a very major player as far as archetypes go. But the thing I liked about ISO Rev was that you can't just have the two cards and win the game. You have to have a board presence to win the game. So you have to have something that will benefit from you untapping those every time. Sure, maybe a grape shot you would win, but that's a little bit more edge case. But for the most part, people would run them in Timna Thrasios decks, and they would have a big dork package. So you'd be tapping and untapping all of your dorks, generating infinite mana, then sinking it into Thrasios, find your win con and win the game. That was all really, really cool. But you needed a board presence to do it. So if I just Toxic Deluged and wiped your dorks away, and then you cast ISO Rev, you're not doing anything with that. So also on top of the fast mana argument, so if you don't have a whole bunch of mana rocks, or you didn't establish a bunch of mana rocks, especially in the fast mana realm of things, ISO Rev isn't doing anything. So it requires more of a board presence, which allows you to be disrupted more easily, which allows for a little bit more of a balanced and, I guess a more interactive game.
I agree, Ryan. Moving on, one last tiny little thing. You know what would not be on our CEDH ban list, Ryan? Drannith Magistrate. It's time.
What are you talking about?
It is time for some nuance. As many people know on the internet, if you happen to follow myself or Ryan beyond on just youtube.com, I'm sure that Ryan and I both believe that for a variety of reasons, Drannith Magistrate should be banned in the EDH format due to philosophical concerns surrounding such a cheap and readily available creature just getting to shut off everybody's commander in the format that is called Commander, right? Obviously, it's something I'm less ironclad belief in than I was before. I think it makes sense for it to be banned. I get why people don't think it should be banned, but you know where it would not be banned? CEDH.
I agree, 100%. In CEDH, Drannith Magistrate is legal. There's too many archetypes that allow you to just get your commanders and just run away with the game. Or your commander is a central part of your strategy, and being able to lock those down is really beneficial. In CEDH, not in Commander, because like you said, philosophically, the whole point of the Commander format, literally in its name, is to cast your commanders, and it shuts it down asymmetrically, by the way. So you still get to play the game, and everyone else has got to try and find a way to remove that thing. But the idea of Drannith Magistrate in CEDH is just fine. You need to be able to find a way to stop these people from being able to grind with Timna and Crom so easily. So they'll keep a package in their hand. They'll keep a 7 that is absolutely dumps their entire hand out so they can get Crom onto the battlefield. They're left with 2 cards in hand. Okay, well, if I cast a turn 2 Drannith before your turn, all of a sudden your hand isn't doing much. Your Jeweled Lotus is just dead. And your entire hand was just based upon powering out Crom. Okay, now what are you going to do? So now you have to, it makes people think more strategically. It makes people try to get around certain elements and these things that are blocking them. It also makes them mulligan a little bit more wisely versus just being all in on just going on their commanders, relying so heavily on their commanders in the CDH format. And I know I can hear the detractors now saying, well, that's in Commander too. Get out of my face with that. No, it's not. It's way, way different when we're talking about philosophical fun and competitive things. And not to say that competitive can't be fun, because it can. I'm digging a hole now, so I'm just going to stop talking. Drannith Magistrate is perfectly fine in CEDH.
Ryan, I agree. All right, we've talked about power now for a little bit. We're going to move on to our second section, which should be a little bit shorter, and that is banning things for tournament considerations. Obviously, this is something that is entirely foreign to the current EDH ban list because it's a casual format, not exactly meant for tournament play. We just so happen to be doing that with CEDH. So if there was a CEDH ban list that would exist on its own, I think you would definitely at least have a few cards on there, maybe, for tournament considerations. As the tournament scene has been picking up, we have been experiencing problems with certain cards. Some, kind of on a one-off basis, and we're kind of worried for the future, and some have been a little more consistent. And I wanted to start off with a card that I don't think a lot of people would think of as problematic, but as I have been looking down from the bird eyes view of paying attention of what's going on in tournaments and seeing what's going on, and now that we're running our own tournament series, the Mox Masters Invitational Tournament Series, I have been noticing this one for sure. Seedborn Muse. Thrasios decks love to get their Seedborn Muse into play, and then they get to take so many game actions. You get to untap with everybody. You get to sit there and go, I have mana up, so let's make it look like I have some interaction in my hand. Oh, it's the end of your turn. I'm going to activate Thrasios 3 times with all the mana that I have. So I'm going to look at the top. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to look at my hand. I'm going to look at the card again. And we're going to put that on the bottom, and then we're going to reveal the top card of my library. Oh, it's a land. That goes into play tapped. Excellent. Now I can activate Thrasios 4 times next turn. All right, second activation. Look at the top. Look at my hand that I just looked at. Look at the card again. Look at my hand again. Put that on the top. Reveal the most meaningless card you've ever seen. I'm going to put it into my hand. And that happens every turn for a turn cycle. Mox Masters December, our tournament, unfortunately, became a little bit notorious for how long that tournament was. We were there for all day long and then some. And a major part of this was once we were inside of turns, or even well before turns, there were some Thrasios Seedborn players that were taking up some more than their fair share of the turn cycle. And, we got to keep tournaments moving. We got to keep tournaments on time. We got to keep tournaments moving. And I think that we're starting to see it now, and I think there's a world in which it becomes more of a problem. Seedborn Muse, possibly banned for tournament considerations.
Yeah, basically, I agree with all of that. Like you said, taking 10 seconds even per activation of Thrasios on the end step is, if you're activating Thrasios 3-4 times, that's 30-40 seconds added on to every single turn. Not your turn, every single turn. And what really made that a problem is that a lot of people aren't taking 10 seconds with it. They're taking 20-30 seconds, like you said, when you just took us through that wonderful adventure when you reenacted that just now, so everyone could experience the joy that is Seedborn Thrasios, where you're like, I'm going to look at my hand, and then I'm going to put it down. I'm going to think about a while. And I was like, okay, this is a slow play situation where a judge needs to be called. You don't know your deck enough to say, okay, that's a card I don't want. Put it on the bottom. Oh, well, there's considerations and this and that. Get out of my face with that. You should know this deck. You're in a tournament scene. I could call you for slow play. But the problem is that when we're in turns, everyone gets a turn and then the game is a draw, right? Well, the Seedborn Thrasios player gets a little bit of a mini extra turn at the end of it. And then everyone's priority bullying the Seedborn Thrasios player because they have all the mana and the interaction, because they flipped their Pact of Negation, they flipped their Force of Negation. And so everyone's going to rely on them to do it now. So they're going to activate Thrasios in response and all this other stuff, just like what you said. And it just adds so much time to the game. And you can see it on everyone's faces in CEDH when somebody's resolving a Seedborn Thrasios 3 activations a turn. They're miserable. It's like, just get on with it, Take 15 seconds to do your activations, but for God's sake, just get on with it. It takes so long to do. Yeah, just kill me. Yeah, just exactly. In the game. Just finish the game, please. And it's such a problem because they just take so much time to do it. Even the best ones still activating 4 times a turn. You're still adding precious seconds on the end of every single turn. So for a tournament consideration, I 100% agree with you. The untap everything type effects need to probably go.
Yeah, it would be the same reason where, like if we were starting from an entire blank slate. I tweeted about this the other day because I knew we were going to be talking about it on the podcast, and somebody was like, "Oh yeah, Prophet of Crufix would maybe finally be off the ban list." No, sorry. For the exact same reason why Seedborn Muse might end on to it, Prophet of Crufix, exact same reason. It's Seedborn, but you can cast creatures as Flash too. And it's cheaper.
Oh. Yeah, I lived in the Prophet of Crufix days. Those were some dark days. Basically, what happens is that if you resolved Prophet,
you get to take 4 turns.
That's
a
it.
turn.
You
turn.
get to take a turn
exactly.
at everybody's end step. So be like, okay, I get a time walk every turn. Okay, now hold on. Before you go to your turn, I got a whole bunch of stuff I'm going to do because I have lands untapped and I get to cast creatures with flash. So I just kept going and going and going. You basically had one in step to deal with that before the game was essentially over, but you still took 30 minutes to end the game because you could do exactly lightning bolt on profit, or you were just basically losing that game. And it was a problem. And Seedborn has a very similar problem.
Yep. Moving on a little bit to two of our three things that I wrote down here. We've got Dividing Top plus Counterbalance. This is not something that we've seen make a splash. Kind of for some obvious reasons. Counterbalance, a lot of people are split on that card. Some people who could bring Counterbalance with them to events just choose to not. We're a 100-card singleton, so it's not like you have 4 Counterbalance and 4 top in your deck. You've got one of both, and it's a little harder to assemble, so we don't see it as often as you did in like Legacy, where Dividing Top was banned for tournament considerations. But we haven't had problems with it in the CDH scene, but I could see in a world, especially where the average power level of decks were lowered a little bit, this becomes more of a powerful strategy. And then, you've got 4 turns. That's a lot of turns where somebody can choose to say, I'm going to activate my top here really quick, pay a mana. I'm going to look at the top 3 cards. I'm going to consider this for 10 seconds and then put them back this way and then reveal my counterbalance. And, oh, your spell's countered. Isn't that funny? And that just the same way that even a Thrasios activation just takes a few seconds, when you're doing 3-4 of them on everybody's turn, that adds up. And Dividing Top plus Counterbalance creates much of the same environment.
Yes, definitely. Another thing to consider is that when people see a counterbalance on the battlefield, they will auto yield to the counterbalance trigger. They're like, oh, look, a game-winning spell on the stack. Are you going to flip for counterbalance? And so everyone's like waiting for them to think about that. So there's an automatic like no actions until counterbalance takes place kind of thing. And the person holding the counterbalance now has to ponder on whether or not they want to flip for it, because now they're getting bullied into always flipping for it because they want to use that free resource or that free action to do it. And that's also a consideration that was slowing down games. I saw a game come to a draw because of it not too long ago. And it was because of counterbalance. Everyone's like, well, hold on, flip for counterbalance. Person had a risk 6 study in play. They had Sensei's Divining Top in play. So everything was changing constantly. So they would draw from risk 6. So the counterbalance would be blind again. And then they would maybe flip for, they would do the Sensei's Top thing at times, or they would do some other thing. And so it was just making the game drag on with every single spell. And oh my God, this is a format that casts a lot of spells. So Sensei's Divining Top plus Counterbalance just creates this situation, like you said, where it's miserable. Are they powerful? Yeah. Are they powerful as the things we ban? No. But for tournament considerations, if we want to get things moving, and we want to make sure that, we're going, because we're already like, our tournaments are already like 90 minutes plus, and we don't have turns. We had to change that partially because of Seedborn Thrasios. Most 60 card formats, 60 minutes to play 3 games. We are 90 minutes to play 1 game. And having this kind of stuff take this long just creates such a extra load on the tournament, especially if it's a tournament that still allows turns, that just creates such a miserable day for everyone because everything is just taking so long to execute.
And our final thing here on our tournament considerations list, this is also, it's been a bit of a contentious one over time, specifically at the event Marchesa in 2022. The tournament organizer, joking, wrote up a little bit that Kurokashima had in particular caused some timing issues in that tournament, much the same as we just said that Seedborn Thrasios had caused some timing issues in our tournaments. And it makes sense. You get Kurok and you get Sakashima out, kind of over. It's not deterministically over. People will make you play through it. And playing through Kurok Sakashima, especially if you're not a super skilled and experienced pilot with the deck, can take some time. And it can often be very confusing for your opponents as to what's going on and what you're doing and how the stack is being represented and what is on the stack and that kind of stuff. So if you're not, as a pilot, good with helping people along in that regard too, it can just eat up time. We haven't seen this effect as much since Marchesa. I think some of the conversation around Marchesa made some people not really bring it to tournaments anymore, which is like a shame because it's a cool deck. It's a powerful deck. Um, and I think people have also, as opponents have learned more about the deck, know more about what's going on. So they eat up less time asking questions and trying to interrupt and trying to figure out the best time to interact, because there's times to interact in there. There's not many, but once you learn them, you remember them and stuff, and you don't have to sit there table talking about it for 10 minutes, which helps. But the deck as a whole creates a lot of game actions. It can create a lot of confusion. It can create confusing stacks. All of that stuff can add up for time. I think if I had to make a choice right now, I certainly wouldn't put Krukoshima on my ban list for tournament considerations, but it would be on a watch list.
I would definitely put it on a watch list as well. The thing about Krukoshima is basically what you said, and it's full of game actions and non-deterministic loops. If somebody has a discard outlet, a Gitrog monster, and a Dakmor salvage in play, I'm okay to scoop it up because I know that they can just do. I know it's non-deterministic. That's not the case with Krukoshima. That is not a Gitrog loop because they still have to draw their cards. They still have to win their flips. They have to flip for every one. A round of priority happens in between every single flip. And people are always discussing, is now the time to interact? Should I do it here? Should I do it on top of it? Should I let them resolve this one? What about this roll? What about that roll? What are they going to do with that? Who's the Jessica's Will going to target? Should I get some stuff out of my hand? And there's so many things that are happening with these game actions and non-deterministic loops. And the Krukoshima player isn't even guaranteed to win. So you have to see them play it out. And even the most skilled pilots during their turns usually take a long time. Ken, love Ken, absolutely. I think he's the best one. He's kind of the brainchild of it. He's kind of the father of it. And he still takes long turns when he's winning.
He moves through those faster than anyone I've ever seen, easily.
And he's so good at it.
And he's very good at explaining to his opponents what's going on and keeping track of the stack. And he always has a lot of copy tokens and all that kind of stuff too. And that's kind of what you need. And even Ken playing like out an idealized turn can still take a couple minutes.
Yeah. And that's a long time. And that's a lot of actions, because it's not like tank time where you're like thinking and pondering, kind of like with top counterbalance or with Seedborn Thrasios. This things are happening. So there's rounds of priority constantly going on where people are also thinking about the hand. Is now the time to interact? I'm going to maybe fire this off here or there. I don't know. Is it too late? And they're talking with the table about every single godforsaken flip that has to happen in that game. And that's what usually ends up creating a problem, is that even though the flips are there and the pilot is good, they can still take a long time to do it because the loops are non-deterministic. You get your Jessica's Will, you exile 3 cards. Oh, they're 3 lands. Okay. So now you got to kind of do some more stuff to try and get there and do all these other things. And it can really create these long games for tournament considerations that it can be a problem.
I certainly agree with you, Ryan. And, we're nearly out of time for today. We were going to talk about maybe unbans or whatever, but we don't need to talk about unbans. The EDH...
I don't want to talk about unbans.
And like we said, we kind of came at this with the assumption a little bit of we're working with a blank slate here. Most of the stuff on the EDH ban list as it currently exists is there for reasons that don't have to do with competitive Magic the Gathering, and so a lot of it could come off, whatever. People like to talk about unbans in CEDH, like for CEDH. I don't know, take it all off, put the Power 9 back on. Slap Prophet of Krufix on there too for tournament considerations. It's a decent start.
And then formulate the ban list from there. To think that everybody's going to know everything that's ever going to happen when sets are constantly being released and new strategies could potentially emerge when you get rid of things like Thassa's Oracle and Underworld Breach and Dockside, there's no way to determine what else is going to be able to belong on this ban list. And so you have to let the natural ecosystem determine that for you. Does the format end up in a really healthy place? Do new strategies emerge that start to dominate? Well, time is what tells you that once these things have cleared the path for those strategies to try and prove themselves. And so I wouldn't fill the ban list with 100 cards or anything like that to start. I would do something like they did with Pioneer. Hey, we're banning fetches. Let's see what happens, and that's the rest of it. And then they let the players and the format determine what needs to be banned from that point. I thought that was a really cool strategy, and that's probably what I'd do here. I would ban, just like you said, Power 8, these couple cards, and then let the ecosystem tell me what else needs to be a problem to be banned.
Ryan, I entirely agree. And, we're out of time for the day. So, if you were putting together a CDH ban list, what do you think you would ban? Why would you ban stuff? Would you start with the EDH ban list? Would you start with a blank slate? What do you think of the concept of a CDH ban list in the first place? As I alluded to at the top of the podcast, as interesting as a thought experiment this might be, having its own ban list, not great. CDH being its own format, lots of problems with that. As I said, I wrote an article about it. You can find it by searching my name and the concept of a CDH ban list. Google will show it to you if you're interested in reading more about that. But, make sure to give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite podcast aggregator, whatever that may be. You'd be surprised how much it helps people find us. And you can also find Playing with Power on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All of those links are in the episode description. And that wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.